Hello, it's Ian McTavish, lead mentor for Hoya Robotics Team 4152. This is the third in our series of Techno Girls MiniBot tutorials. Even though we're running this with a Techno Girls program in Huntsville, this series can be used by anybody. So this particular slideshow is going to deal with adding mounting holes, and it should take not too long to do. And again, I just need to make sure to thank all of our sponsors. And this slideshow is on the website. I'll post a link to it, so it makes it a little easier to find. And I'll be switching off of this slideshow into onShape in a moment. So in the last tutorial, we created square tubing. This tutorial, we're going to add mounting holes so that way we can secure things. And the reason we want the mounting holes is we're going to connect these pieces of square tubing together, and we'll need machine screws to do that. When you're working with aluminum, it's not like wood where you can drill a screw in. It's a little harder, so machine screws are perfect, but we want to have holes in it to do that. So let's get started. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. Here's my part. I've got my piece of square tubing, and I can see that this is the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the top of that square tubing, and that allows me to select that so I can create a sketch on that. In the last tutorial, we were creating a sketch using one of the planes. This time we're going to use the face of this square tubing. So now that I've in my sketch, you'll see the toolbars changed. There's my little thing, and just a reminder, I press the letter N. The letter N will move my screen so that way I can see where everything is and be able to figure that out. So we're going to add a hole. So the center point circle is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to click that circle, and I'm going to start up at the top here. Notice how I'm holding my mouse over the top, and that makes this orange, and now I get this dotted line. This allows me to line up that the center of the circle with the origin, which happens to be in the center of my square tubing. So that, the little icon indicates that it's a vertical constraint. So I'm going to click to start, and that allows me to start my circle. And I'm just going to make sure to click somewhere. Notice that I'm making sure nothing's orange. I'm going to click a second time, and hands off the mouse. The key thing is to type in your measurement. Now, we're using a 1364 size hole. So the number 13/64, enter. And the reason we're picking that particular number is that we're going to be using a machine screw, and the machine screw that we use for our robots is called a 1032. And we have done some tests, and we found that a 1032 fits perfectly in a 1364 hole, and we can easily do 1364 holes on our CNC machines, so it makes life much easier. So my circle is set. The next thing is to set how far apart that circle is. So over here is my dimension tool. And when I press the letter D, I can pick the dimension tool as well. And I always encourage people to find shortcuts because it just makes your work much quicker. So with the dimension tool selected, I'm now going to click the center of that circle and the origin right there, and just move over to the side and click a second time. So this is going to be how far apart, and I'm going to set it to be 0.5 inches apart. And just going to turn off the dimension tool. Now, 0.5 inches is really handy because a lot of the parts that we get from different manufacturers kind of use that standard. So that's why we're using it. Now, we're going to add a hole, but instead of drawing a whole bunch of holes, we're going to take advantage of a tool called the linear pattern tool. So I'm going to select that linear pattern tool, and then I'm going to select the circle. And what happens now is that this allows me, and I'm just going to zoom out here a bit, this allows me to set a pattern. You'll notice that the pattern is going this direction and this direction. I'm going to click this arrow because I want it to go that way. And there's also a number here, so it says to only make one of these, well, I'm going to double click that, and my square tubing is 14 inches, so I'm going to type 14 times 2, and the reason I'm multiplying it by 2 is because I want a hole every half inch. And the key thing is that I'm subtracting 1, because if I was to do this, I would end up with the hole every half inch, and then right at the end, I would get a half hole, because if I did the math, that's how it would work out. So that gives me 27 holes. And over here where it says 3, I don't need 3 to the side because my square tubing is only 1 inch. So I'm just going to change that 3 to a 1. And that should give me my pattern. And to modify these again, I just double click, and that allows me to select them. And I'm going to change my distance. Right now it's doing it 1 inch apart. So I'm going to change that to 0.5. So it's a little confusing doing this the first time. You have to kind of look at all the different values and think, okay, what's that arrow pointing to figure it out. So once I've got that all centered, I should be able to click somewhere else, and that puts in the pattern. And just like that, all my holes are, all the circles for my holes are on the top of my tube. Now, I'm going to just change the name of this sketch top holes, and I encourage people to always name their sketches so that it's easy to understand what everything is. The green check mark to save it. So there's my sketch. It's now saved. To make these into actual holes, I need to now select the sketch over here in my features, and I need to select the extrude button. So with the extrude button, I get a lot of different options. And first thing is that I want to remove these. So I'm going to select remove, and you should see there's some holes. Now, I'm going to change this to through all. And this is really important because it will make my holes through the entire piece. So that's a really, really important piece, so that if I decided I wanted to use 1x2 squared tubing, and so it was 2 inches thick, if I had set a measurement, then it wouldn't go all the way through. So this way it will go through no matter how thick I change that tubing to be. And I'm going to change my name, extrude top holes, green check mark. And if I look through and look on both sides, I should see holes all the way through. So those are my top holes. And I'm just going to click my view cube so I can see my everything. The next is I'm going to click the right hand side, and I am going to click the sketch. Now you'll notice I want to be very careful here. What I select, if I select the right hand side, I'm going to do a sketch along here and I can make my holes. If I accidentally clicked the right plane, then my holes would be in the middle of the square tubing, which is not quite what I wanted to do. So I'm going to select the right hand side, I'm going to select the sketch, and just like always, I press N to normalize my view. So this N, and I am going to create a circle. So I'm just following the same pattern that I did before, holding my mouse over that origin, looking for that horizontal constraint, clicking, sizing, clicking again, and then typing 13/64 to hit enter. And there's my first circle. My first circle I'm going to set at a distance. So there's my dimension tool. I'm going to zoom in with my scroll wheel, click the center of the circle, click the origin, click somewhere else, and type 0.5, and that sets it 0.5 inches. Now for this, I'm going to do slightly different. I am going to do a linear pattern again. So there's the linear pattern, there's the circle. This time I got to switch that arrow. This time it's only going 1, that's fine. I'm going to stick with 1 inch apart, so that's great. Where it says 3 times, I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to type in 14 and hit enter. And I'm just going to click on some space, and I should have all of my holes. Now, because I started a 1/2 inch in, this one will be 1/2 inch. And the reason I'm going 1 inch is because I don't tend to attach as much to the side. I usually attach to the top and the bottom. So I don't want quite as many options on this. Now, I am going to add a circle on the third here, and I'm going to use the same center as that. And this circle is going to be 0.5 inches. And the reason is later on, I'm going to use a bigger hole here, and this is where I'm going to be attaching the wheel. And I know that I need a bigger hole, and we'll cover that in another tutorial. So the third one from both sides, there's my bigger hole. So I've got it done. I'm going to change the name of my sketch to extrude or sketch side holes. Green check mark. And just like before, I want to select that sketch. So sketch side holes, extrude. And again, I'm going to select remove. I'm also going to select through all right there. Now, the problem is that it's adding extra parts. And the reason is that big circle that I had, so I'm just zooming in on that, and I'm going to click the inner part of that because I don't want to make another piece. And I'm just adding that to my holes that I'm removing. So that seems to fix that up nicely. I've only got the one part. And I'm going to call this extrude square tubing. Green check mark. And now I have square tubing. I can see right through my holes. And I've got a nice piece of square tubing. Everything looks good there. And that's it. That's the end of the tutorial. Hope you've enjoyed it. And on the website, we'll keep posting new tutorials as we go.